To be honest, it's a better turnout than I expected for this talk because I wasn't expecting with a Java-focused talk with something that probably you have never heard of. So cool that you are brave enough to come. And I hope you go out with learning something at least. Let's start. I don't think anybody else is going to flock in and fill the room. So yeah, let's start. A little bit about me. My name is Deepu. I'm from India. I live in Netherlands. I'm the co-lead of JHipster. Maybe you have heard of it. It's quite popular in the Java world. I work for Zibia Labs, DevOps product company in the enterprise space. I love Java, JavaScript, web technologies, all kind of stuff. I have written a book about JHipster as well, if you are remotely interested. A word from our sponsor today. So I work for Zibia Labs. We have a release orchestration and deployment automation tool, quite well known in the enterprise space, with all the Gartner quadrants and all those fancy things. Not going to go much deep into these, but if you are interested in these kind of things, check it out. So I want to know a little bit about you guys. So, any JavaScript developers? Okay, not bad. Web developers? Or any kind of web developers? Cool. Types, who likes TypeScript more? Oh, we have 4, 5, cool. And any Node.js application developers, like, you build CLI tools or whatever? Yeah? Any Go or Rust developers? Or, oh, cool, you might find it interesting. Okay, how many of you have actually heard of Deno? I know one person. So, okay, 2. Okay, cool. Deno is a modern JavaScript or TypeScript runtime, quite similar to Node.js, but also a bit different from Node.js. It's also a scripting environment, similar to Node.js. So it is also created by Dahl in 2018, who was the original creator of Node.js as well. So according to him, Deno is what Node.js should have been. This is his own words. So he kind of created it based on what he learned from doing Node.js for so much time and from all the mistakes that happened, from all the things that happened there. So it is also built on top of V8. So underlying engine is V8. But unlike Node.js, which is written in C++, this is written in Rust. And it uses Tokio. It's a scheduling framework for Rust. So to manage processes, threads, and these kind of things. Some of the important things about Deno, which makes it different from Node.js, is that it is secure by default. We'll go a little bit more detail into those things separately. But it's secure by default. That means it gives you a secure sandbox to begin with. It has built-in tooling, quite similar to Go or Rust or these newer languages, which is quite nice. It can execute remote scripts. You can point to a script and execute those. You don't have to have it locally and stuff. It's quite lightweight. I think the current version is around 10 MB. Single executable, multi-platform, so quite handy. It took a lot of inspiration from Go and Rust, actually. So a little bit more from Go, probably, in how modules and stuff are organized. So yeah, so it's quite modern and it's quite new. The biggest thing for me, it does not use NPM, and there is no Node modules hell. I think that probably, I really like Node.js, but I really hate the Node modules part. Write a small CLI application, you download 500 MB of Node modules, downloading for 5 minutes. What the hell? So that enough was good enough for me, right? Another thing I like about Deno is that Deno loves TypeScript. I also love TypeScript, so you can see where I'm going with this. So it has first-class support for TypeScript. That means you don't have to have a transpilation layer in order to get it working, like TS Node or Babel or whatever. You don't need that. It can just work out of the box with TypeScript, which is quite cool. Anybody who doesn't know what TypeScript is? I'm glad, so I don't have to go through this slide then. So it saves me time. You may ask, why TypeScript? Why not JavaScript? I mean, JavaScript at current stage is quite good enough, right, for scripting and these kind of things. Of course, like if you're doing bigger projects, I maintain a project written in JavaScript, which is with a humongous code base. So I know how difficult it is to maintain something purely written in JavaScript, not easy. But TypeScript makes it easier. I mean, I'm not saying it is a silver bullet, but it makes it easier. I mean, you don't have to always use the type safety things. I mean, you don't have to write types for everything. You know? It has great type inference, which by itself helps a lot, even if you don't write types, which is still great. It has great IDE support. I think VS Code has excellent support for TypeScript. IntelliJ also has quite decent support for TypeScript. So compared to JavaScript, you get better IDE support, easier to refactor, better linting, error identification and stuff, features from the feature, or like you get all the features of the latest ECMA standard. So currently, I think with TypeScript you get up to ES10 and probably soon ES11. So which means you don't need to use Babel and all these in between things to get stuff done. So the single the language itself gives everything to you. Also additional features like private variables, annotations, and these kind of things, which are quite nice. And some of these features also kind of help in the JavaScript evolution. I mean, some of the features, inspire features in JavaScript as well. And much better coding style. It's personal opinion. I really like the coding style when we use TypeScript, especially in React and these kind of things. It's much more concise and less verbose. So I used to hate transpiling code. I didn't like TypeScript when it was out. Like I was like, why should I transpile my JavaScript? I don't want to, I don't want to go there. The one thing I like about JavaScript was I didn't have to wait for a compilation kind of phase. I can just write and I can execute. So I didn't like it, but when I started using it, I saw why it is useful. It was helpful. So if I have to transpile my code, I would still prefer not to. I would love if V8 can run TypeScript out of the box, maybe sometime. I would love it, but we are not there yet. So if I have to transpile, I would still prefer TypeScript for that. It's one of the best out there for that purpose. So let's get started with Deno stuff. I'm going to make myself a bit more comfortable. So you can also try out. I don't see anybody with the laptop out, so never mind. So it's quite easy to install. If you're on Homebrew with Linux or Mac, you can do the brew install, or if you have the Rust, okay, nobody said Rust, right? So forget about that. Cargo is for Rust. So, or basic curl or whatever that is for Windows. The PowerShell stuff. I'm just kidding. I used to use Windows 2 years ago. So main features. This is the one that I like the most. You can just point to a script and you can run it. So that's really cool. So for example, yeah, you can do this, which is quite nice. I mean, not the most secure thing to do, like just point to random remote scripts and run them. But if you know what it is and if it is your scripts and stuff like that, it's quite handy. Yeah? Especially if you're scripting stuff, really handy. But this is the most important feature, something that is lacking in the Node.js world. Because if you have a Node.js application, and say, for example, you install something from NPM, it has all sort of access. It can read your files. It can, you can do all sort of stuff. So you never know. Some bad actors, like we have a lot of such examples in the Node.js community, right? When people, hack something, publish something. Those kind of things can be. I won't say it can be completely avoided. There are still some loopholes. You'll always find loopholes somewhere. But this is much better. It gives you more control in terms of what you allow or disallow your code to do. So you can, so by default, Deno applications doesn't have any kind of access, like doesn't have file, environment, subprocess, or network access. You have to explicitly provide those, either using command line flags or using, you can also pass it down programmatically for subprocess, or it will also prompt you if you don't. So let's see some examples of that. Mm-hmm. So the script here is quite simple, just two console statements, right? So nothing fancy here. So this is fine. It doesn't do anything. So I'm just importing the HTTP server, and I'm trying to listen to port 8000, right? So let's try it again. Yeah. So it's going to ask you. It's not going to just create the server. So it's going to ask your permission. So you can say yes. It's going to do that. Or you could also just say, You can also do this, that is also fine, or you can also even go further and do some fine-grained controls. So for example, I'm doing 8080 here, right? It's still going to ask me because I'm using 8000, right? So that's not going to work. So no. So it has all these fine-grained controls, which is quite nice. So you can provide granular permissions. You have different flags for different kind of permissions. You can provide for all or individually fine-grained, all these things. Permissions can be revoked, which is really nice because in your program, if you're a good actor, in your program, when you are done with certain permission, you can revoke that so that you can be sure none of your dependencies or whatever will try to use a permission which was granted for your application. So if your application uses other dependencies, you can make sure that you still fine-grain it within your code. Like you are accessing a secure file, access it, revoke the permission. So it's more secure, you have more control. You can have whitelist and these kind of things, which is also quite cool. So if you're worried about security or if you want to have more secure scripting environments, then this is a great sandbox for that. So yeah. So next thing is standard modules. This is becoming, Java already had that, like standard modules for quite a while. And newer languages, it also has standard modules. So this also has standard modules. At this point in time, this is quite limited, but I'm pretty sure it's quite new. As the framework grows, it's going to have even more standard modules. So now it has like, all sort of stuff like colors, datetime, FS, flags, HTTP, WebSocket, these kind of things. For example, like I can do here. Yeah. Oops. So yeah, this I was already importing the server. So you can like another one, for example. Let's say allow all. It's going to be fine. Yeah. So standard module stuff. So nothing extraordinary there. Another good thing I like about Deno is that it doesn't try to do a lot of magic for you. It only supports ES modules, which is the ECMAScript standard. It doesn't support recur.js or common.js or these kind of things. So there is no magical module resolution like how Node tries to do. If you look at how Node tries to or resolve modules, it goes through like some, I think at least like 9 layers of resolution, like trying to resolve by index.js, then trying to resolve by the library name.js, then like go level outside, and all these kind of magic things, tries to help you. It's quite nice, but it puts a lot of pressure on like the library maintenance and stuff, like with weird things, the Node.js project maintainers, also for like consumers, right? Users who are writing programs, sometimes weird errors appear and then you have to debug through all these things to, because a lot of magic happening there. It doesn't do any of that. Quite simple ES modules only, right? So third-party modules are imported by URL. We saw that. It's all URL-based import. Doesn't mean that it has to be the Deno land one. This is just standard modules. It can also be something like yeah, it can be from a raw GitHub URL, for example, or any URL that you publish. So this is quite handy, right? So if you have a library that you depend on, you can just go with the raw GitHub URL for a specific tag or specific version or whatever, right? So it can. Another thing it does very well is caching. It kind of considers your remote code as immutable. So once downloaded, it's cached globally. So unless you specifically ask it to reload, it doesn't reload it. It doesn't download it at all. Unlike Node modules, which downloads it all, regardless of whatever offline things you try to do, it always ends up downloading like half the internet, right? So it doesn't try to do that. Once downloaded, immutable, it's there, unless you change a version or so changing version means you're changing the URL, right? So a new URL is always downloaded and cached. Again, cached. So it's quite efficient in that. It can do dynamic imports, quite normal. So another thing is, for example, yeah, so you can kind of use any ES module from stuff like unpackage or JS PPM there are certain registries which kind of convert node modules into ES compatible modules and provide you. Of course, it's not going to work with all the current node modules out there, but some will, some not. So for example, lodash-es works. You can import from that, from unpackage, for example. Why is this here? Okay, yeah. So this one still works. Yes, it's fine. I think I have two. Yeah, this is not required. So, but when you start doing all these URL-based imports, it kind of becomes ugly, right? So, not everyone might prefer this, right? So, what you can also do is you can do something like this, for example. Let me show the. So, yeah. So it supports something called import maps. It's quite used in the Node.js world, import maps, especially with TypeScript projects and stuff. So you can also use the same import map. So it's just a simple JSON where you specify certain key value kind of combination of your shorthands and your expanded URLs. I mean, it doesn't have to be the full URLs. Can be just like until HTTP, for example. Then you can say. So for example, here you have defined something for HTTP, for the FMT one, and for Lodash, right? So I have used the base URLs as import maps. And here I can do, I think this one, yeah. There is no IDE support for these things yet because the plugin for Deno is quite new for VS Code. Doesn't have all sort of support, so you might see some reds. So ignore those. Still works. So this is a bit nicer to look at. So if you have bigger projects, you might want to have an import map to organize these things. And also, that makes it easier to change things, right? You don't have to go change URLs everywhere. You wouldn't want to do that, right? Upgrading a version. You might want to do it at one place. So this is not exactly package JSON, but the closest that Deno has, for example. So this should work. I did something wrong. Oh, yeah, sorry. You have to specify the import map. So import map is import map.json. Yeah. So you have to specify the import map to use when you bundle it or when you create it. So yeah, as I said, there are official third-party modules in the Deno registry itself. It just forwards to your own URLs and stuff like that. You can try to use npm modules from JSPM or unpackage or pika.dev. These are where you can find some, but again, all of them might not work. Some might not. So your mileage might vary there. So yeah. Next thing is built-in tooling. This is quite nice. I mean, Go and Rust does it quite nicely, which I think every language should do this. It really helps in terms of, it is efficient because you start a new project, you don't have to bother about setting up a testing infrastructure for that. That might also, be the reason you might put off testing. Like you don't want to deal with that now, right? But if the language or the framework gives you that out of the box, you're more likely to use that, right? So when you're writing a Deno project, it has inbuilt testing support. So yeah, you can easily just write it from the beginning. You don't have, because you're not going to set up karma or whatever, right, to do that. So Go does it quite well. So this is inspired from that. Rust also does it to an extent. So it has a built-in support for testing, installation, bundling, formatting, generating documentation, that is Deno types, generating your environment info. Soon they are going to add linting and debugging support as well. So built-in tooling is quite nice to have. For example, the testing part, how it looks is, so it's quite easy. It's part of the standard module. You just import the test and assert methods, and that's it. Then you just run Deno test. Yeah, so it's quite nice. So this fails. So for example, let me fix it. Voila. So very easy to start with. So this is likely to encourage you to write tests from the beginning instead of waiting for a time where you can set up your infrastructure and do it. So easy to begin with. I want to write a script. I can start off immediately with Deno with test and everything, right? So formatting, for example, you can use Deno FMT provide the path and it formats. But again, it uses prettier for that. So if you have a decent ID, you can also just use the prettier formatting directly. But it also can do that for you. Saves time in teams, especially because you don't spend time discussing about whether to use tab, space, or whatever. Right? Just use what the tool. One thing I like about Go again, like Go formatting is really opinionated, doesn't give you much option. It is there, use it. That's it, done. Don't spend time discussing about these unnecessary things, right? So it's a good thing, at least in my opinion. Browser compatibility. So Deno also, something that they try to do is they want to be as much as browser compatible as possible. So if you write a JavaScript program, pure JavaScript program, because you can write both JavaScript and TypeScript. So if you write pure JavaScript without using the global Deno object, which is, if you don't use this object, this has a lot of inbuilt methods, the global Deno object. If you don't use this object and write a JavaScript program, it is browser compatible. So most of these inbuilt methods are also available in other standard packages, like FS also has all the file reading stuff, for example. Another thing is, and if you really want to write in TypeScript, still fine. Write it in TypeScript, use Deno bundle to bundle it as JavaScript. Don't use global Deno, still browser compatible. Let's take a quick example. This one, yeah. So it's nothing, just a simple method that logs, right? You should be familiar if you have done any front-end coding. This is classical like browser object, right? So Deno supports using onload and unload, and also supports using the window.add event listeners. So that means you can use unload, load events to do some stuff with your code, and this code will work both in Deno. Sorry. So this is going to work here, as well as I can bundle it because I have written it in TypeScript, so I have to bundle it. So I will run Deno bundle, bundling it as browser compatibility JS. Then you go here, then you have a JS file generated with all the dependencies included. So as you can see, it has like the Lodash things. So all my dependencies are also there. It's not optimized yet. You can see like there are comments, there is even source maps and stuff. So this is not focused for it's not optimized for browser usage. You might still want to optimize it if you really want to load it in a browser. So that's probably they would add an option to do it in a more optimized way. But this is still there. So I can do this, and then I can add it in I can use require.js to import it in a HTML file, and I can dispose this and go live. So yeah. So it has run the onload event and printed out from that. So it is browser compatible. So, but doesn't mean that anything that you write will be browser compatible. But if you want to make something usable on server side as well as client side, it is possible. Whereas in Node.js, it is literally impossible because of all the require.js without doing a lot of hacks. So this is possible here, which is again a cool thing. Another thing I like is the Deno API is fully asynchronous, and it returns promise, unlike in Node. There is no callback hell. Everything returns a promise. That means no callback hell, consistent API across, and works great with async await. So let's quickly do something there. Async. No. Sorry? Ah, shit, sorry. Thank you. Nice eyes. Async, yeah. So here, just trying to open a file, right? So this gives you a promise. So obviously you can do file, blah, 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 right? And let me insert the other one as well. So I can do this, right? So I got the promise, I can resolve the promise and do some stuff. So let's run this for... Yeah, Fine. So prints that. So this is quite nice to have because the entire Deno API is going to give you a promise. So you can do whatever you can do with the promise. So you wouldn't have all that callback hell that you would normally do in Node.js, which after after three callbacks, it gets mind blown kind of thing. But still, there are callbacks here, right? So still not that great, right? You can go further. Sorry? Yeah, I'm just providing all permissions. Like I don't want to give individual here, so because that was not the point, right? So all permissions. So another thing to make it even more nicer is Deno supports top level await. So top level await is the ES standard, current ES standard says that await can be only used inside an async function. That is the current ES standard. But there is a TC32 proposal, which is at stage 2 now for top level await. That means you can have await at the top level of your file without having async. So it's assumed async. So it is not stage 3 yet. That means TypeScript wouldn't implement something because TypeScript has a rule that it will only start implementing something when it is stage 3. So TypeScript is still waiting, but Deno already supports that. So what we can do here is I can remove this. I can do this. Right? So this is going to complain because this is returning a promise. But I can just add an await here. And magic, it's going to give me the file directly. I don't have to do the resolution here. So that means I can remove this. I can remove this. Oops. Voila. So this is much nicer to read, right? So when writing Deno code, you can get away with not having to write callbacks and all this. You can write almost procedural kind of code with async await and with top level awaits. It will be much nicer, much less code, less verbose and clearer, right? So that is also a cool thing. So yeah. Okay, I also wanted to do this. Let me quickly make it more cat-like. I'm going to use Deno args should be 0, no, 1. And use the file name here. What should I read? What should I read? I can read itself. Yeah, so you have a cat program, right? It's quite simple to write. WebAssembly support. So anybody who doesn't know what WebAssembly is, I can do a quick explanation. Yeah. Okay. So basically, it's again ECMA, new ECMA standard, where you can write programs in languages like C++, Golang, Rust, and few others. And you can compile that into something called WASM, which is the WebAssembly format. You can compile that into a WASM binary, and you can load that into your JavaScript runtime. You can run it in browsers, you can run it in Node.js or whatever, right? So it's a JavaScript standard which interoperates with other languages, which has support for that. So kind of makes it easier for you to interoperate, interuse, code. Like for example, if you want to do something quite intensive, which C++ can do very well, right? Doesn't make sense to do that in JavaScript. So you can write that in C++, export it as a function, use that in JavaScript. So I think this would be used a lot more in the future. It's becoming bigger and bigger. It will be used a lot more in the future. All the modern browsers supports WebAssembly. So Deno also supports WebAssembly. So let me insert a quick snippet for that. This is based on the LLVM. So because V8 is written on in C++, so underneath everything is run as LLVM. So if you write it in an LLVM compatible language like C++, Go, Rust, or a lot of LLVM compatible language. So in the end, this is all run as machine code, right? So it doesn't matter. So you compile it as WASM binary. If it is LLVM compatible, it's going to run as machine code. Doesn't matter if it is. Yeah, that's why it doesn't matter. So that is why you have a WASM standard for the binaries, right? So here I have a simple C++ factorial, right? Factorial in C++ is really weird because it doesn't. You have to have a different kind of code to make it work more than 20. So Yeah, so I have this. I already I use something called Wasm Fiddle, which is an online converter. So you can write C++ here, build it, and download it as Wasm. You can also set up your own environment to do that, which is more work, to compile Wasm. So this is the easiest way. So I just did it here, and I have the Wasm file. Of course, binary, so unreadable here. Here, I can use the standard JavaScript API for WebAssembly. This is the standard ECMAScript WebAssembly API. To load, again, I'm using top-level await to make it simpler without callbacks and stuff. So I can load this Wasm file, which is the binary of the C++ program. I can create a new WebAssembly instance, get the factorial out of it, the function out of it, which was exported. So whatever you basically put as function at the top level here can be imported here. So, and then I can run it here. So let's do it. Permission. Yeah, so you get the output from the C++ factorial program. So you can actually do benchmarks to see the difference. Write a factorial in JavaScript, do it in C++, run some benchmarks, then you will see why it is considered faster and efficient. I mean, of course, it doesn't make much sense. It makes more sense for smaller programs because it's less complex to debug. Like these kind of intensive programs, you can always use WebAssembly. Even in browser, you can, today, in all modern browsers, you can do that. Anyway, that's WebAssembly is a different topic, so let's move on. Subprocess. So Deno, of course, supports subprocess. So every subprocess in Deno is a web worker. That means web workers in V8 by default uses a separate V8 instance. So each web worker has its own V8 instance. So this is the closest you can get to multi-threading in JavaScript because JavaScript is single-threaded, right? So you can do that in Deno as well. So let's. What did I do? Nope. So yeah, so it's quite simple. Just call Deno run, pass it as arguments. Again, you're using Deno run here, just running a Deno program, right? So remote URL, local URL, whatever, arguments or whatever, you keep passing it, pipe the outputs, and yeah, this will run a subprocess. Let's try to use it. Use the subprocess. So again, with the top level await, I can get the code out, inspect the code. I can output the standard, to stdio out or handle errors. So let's run it again. Yeah. So I just ran the cat program that we did earlier as a subprocess. So nothing fancy here. Just that the feature is there. Options. So let's go a bit bigger, clear. So it has quite a lot of options. So we saw all this, like the permission part. You can also pass a tsconfig file if you want to modify some of the TypeScript compilation options. You can even play around with the thread, but more advanced options. If you know how Tokyo works, you can play around with threads, optimize and stuff like that. Import maps, it can be import maps again, can be, sorry, not import maps. I wanted to say something about reload, yeah. Yeah, of course, you can disable prompts. That means without some permission, it will just fail instead of prompting. You can reload modules. As I was telling you earlier, everything is cached. If you want to reload, you have to specify the flag. But you can, again, control it. You can reload everything or specific modules, whatever you want, right? You can control that things. And if you are, again, advanced user, you can also try to play around with the V8 options and flags as well. So there's a lot of options there. And you can also read some environment variables for proxies and stuff like that. So those are the options. So why is Deno better than Node.js? Because there are a lot of advantages. Of course, it is new, kind of like almost a year old. It is easier to install because single dependency does everything. There is no separate package manager and stuff like that. It's secure by default. A lot of people might find that quite interesting, that you can trust Deno programs better than Node.js programs. It's simpler module resolution. That means less time fiddling with weird errors because of the fancy module resolutions, and you don't have to worry about different things like common.js, recur.js, ES, and all these things. Decentralized and globally cached third-party modules. One of the biggest problem of the Node.js ecosystem is, I think, undoubtedly it's NPM, right? It had a lot of issues. Even recently, it had a lot of issues. It is so much centralized. Everything. Node.js is the biggest community. Actually it's bigger than most of the other languages combined. The community. It's so many packages. Biggest package manager is Node modules, and it has more packages than Java and every other things combined. So it's so huge, and it's all dependent on a single player, right? It's so centralized. So if NPM goes down, everything is broken. If a single NPM module breaks, everything breaks, right? So it's so dependent on someone, which is kind of not what the web world is trying to do, right? We are trying to become more decentralized, so it's not the way. So this can make that happen. This is decentralized, so everything is based on URLs or whatever. So you can choose to put it wherever you want, right? You can host your own. You can have all your dependencies hosted in your own repo or somewhere. You can use that. So it's more decentralized. Doesn't depend on a single player for anything. Even the Deno's registry that it provides, right? It doesn't store anything. It's just a forwarding registry. It forwards to whatever you configure there. It resolves to your own URLs. So as I said, no dependency on package managers, which is the biggest problem in the Node.js. So Node.js is quite cool, but NPM makes it look bad. Native TypeScript support, of course, follows web standards, and as we saw, it even has some of these standards implemented even before. It is there in modern browsers, can run remote scripts, and of course built-in tooling. So these are the advantages of Deno over Node.js. And you may ask, why does it matter? Like, I mean, it works perfectly fine, right? I can do it in Node.js. Of course, there is a Node module cell, but we are used to that. You can do it. I can do it in Python, or I can do it in Go, Rust, or whatever, right? But it still matters because you want to believe it or not, how much ever you bash JavaScript, how much ever we make fun of JavaScript or whatever, right? JavaScript is the biggest developer community. Nothing else can even come close to that developer community. It has most number of developers, it has most number of packages, it is the most widely used languages. For whatever the reason be, it's the most widely used language, right? So it is never going to go away. So JavaScript and Java are like cockroaches, right? They never die. 20 years from now, probably it will still be there. Every other languages might die out. These two will still be there. And we will be sitting and someone will be making a presentation about a fancy new framework in JavaScript. I'm pretty sure, right? So, because many people thought they will die out. No, they were wrong. So you can always bet on JavaScript and Java for anything. So these languages will be there. So it's smarter to invest and make it proper. Use it in proper way. So dynamic languages are again people will bash dynamic languages, right? The one thing people make fun of JavaScript the most is that there's no type system. It's so dynamic. Things are shitty, but you need that there are use cases for that, right? There's always use cases for that. So like data science, scripting and tooling, CLI. Well, Python is on the rise because all the data scientists are doing Python all the time because it's quite dynamic and the easiest thing to start with, right? Same in JavaScript. A lot of people are going to start with JavaScript. A lot of people are going to use JavaScript for all the fancy CLI tools and all these things, right? That's not going to change. So at least we can do it better. So Node.js ecosystem has become too heavy and bloated. It's extremely bloated now. So needs some change. And another reason is Node.js has become the de facto without any contenders or like any competition. When competition dies out, innovation also stops, and like then that is where problems happens, like blotting and all that, because people are like too comfortable there, right? So you need to have some competition. I mean, even NPM, for example, started cleaning up their act when Yarn was introduced, right? Before that, NPM didn't even used to care about 20 minutes for downloading something. Come on, seriously? But then they cleaned up their act because there was competition. So I'm pretty sure if Deno becomes mainstream, there will be competition. It will be a competition for Node.js, and things will get better for the better of the community, right? So many Python Node.js kind of use cases can be replaced with TypeScript using Deno, because again, TypeScript is a much easier language to start with, probably, or at least for me, than Python. Maybe for many other Java developers as well, because TypeScript is more similar to Java than others, right? So yeah, then again, better API, better developer experience, easier to build and distribute, secure, does not download the internet all the time. So maybe better for the environment as well. All that Node modules, imagine all that Node modules being downloaded at this moment. So many gigabytes of data being downloaded this moment. And CI servers. So, of course, doesn't mean that there are no challenges, right? Doesn't mean that someone can introduce a new runtime and then be like, oh, yes, fine, awesome, the ultimate runtime, right? No, it's not going to be the case. So, one of the biggest problem is going to be fragmentation because Deno, by choice, chose not to be compatible with Node. Their API is not compatible with Node. As we saw, it is all promise based, and there's no, and even might like differs in terms of arguments and all these things. So it is on purpose not compatible. It is not going to be compatible with majority of the Node modules out there. That means majority of the libraries out there are not compatible. Doesn't mean it's hard to make it compatible. The authors would have to add an additional build step in their pipeline to create a version which is compatible with this. There are tools to do that already. So it is possible. But the biggest problem would be for users who want to migrate from Node.js to Deno, if they really like Deno, right? Because it's not compatible. You literally would rewrite half of your application, except for the logic part, all the API stuff you would rewrite. There'll be a lot of rewrites. There's not going to be a magic tool that will convert from this to that for you. Maybe Webpack kind of things might help a little bit in those conversions, but still you have tremendous work in converting big projects especially. Currently, the bundles are not optimized, but I think may not be a big deal because I'm pretty sure they will add, once it gets mainstream, they will add options to have it output bundled. I mean, optimized. It's not a big deal. Just you need to add uglify.js or something to make it happen. So, stability. It's quite new. Node.js is battle tested. It's really stable for a lot of use cases. Whereas this is going to be brittle because it is new. It will take some time. Definitely not production ready because it is not even, it's beta kind of thing, alpha, beta kind of thing now. So let's put this to use and build a cool application, or I built it already, just at least see it. I don't want to build the entire thing now from scratch. It's not a big application anyway. So I put together this nice little piece here. Basically, nothing huge. These are not important. Just sets up a server, listening at 8,000. It takes an argument, else uses my website. Has a async immediately IAFE, immediately invoking function here. Almost like window. You can also put this as a window on load, the same thing. We have a await for loop. That means it's going to run for every request coming from the server, right? And asynchronously, which is nice. So I'm just massaging the URL a little bit based on what URL comes in, using the fetch standard fetch API to get it and responding it. So what is this? A simple proxy, right? The dumbest proxy possible for something. So I can run this Deno app. I'm going to run it with Google. So it's a dumb proxy for Google, for example. So I can do. Yeah, so it's all going to go through my proxy. Of course, you can make it more, fancy. You can make it smart to do whatever you want. So it's so easy to build a proxy kind of thing, right? So it's so easy in TypeScript, especially with the nicer features and the APIs Deno provides. I can go further and I can make it almost like, because we want to build applications. We're not going to always run Deno blah blah blah, Deno blah blah. You want applications that can be distributed, installed, right? So what we can do is I can do Deno install. I can also bundle, publish, and then install from that URL. That is also possible. So that means I have to bundle it first, put it in a repo or publish it in a HTTP URL. Then you say Deno install URL. That is also perfectly fine. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say install this as, this is my application name. Install it as my proxy from this file with net allowed, right? So if I don't do that, then it's going to prompt you every time you run it. That is also possible. So that gives the control to the user, whereas this gives the control to the kind of when you are installing itself. So when you install, you can choose. Kind of like Android kind of way. So it's going to download some stuff. It has successfully installed to my path. So I should have my proxy for some reason. This is interesting. Okay, something messed up my path, so I'm just going to quickly do this here. Yeah, so I can again run it with Twitter this time, for example. Nah, Twitter is not good. It takes you to the login screen. I'll go with Google. Ah, shit. Sorry. Forgot the double slash. Oops. Something went wrong. Relative URL. Sorry, what? What? Ah, sorry. Ah, damn me. That is what happens when you only have a few minutes left. Correct, right? Yeah, so same. So that is how you would build and install applications. So in ideal world, you will be publishing it and somebody would be installing. So again, installing would be so much easier. You're just pointing to URL, installing it. So no man in the middle like a registry which you depend to or not. So no possibility of like people hacking the registry and these kind of things, right? Let's get back here. I have 3 more minutes. Yeah, so it is still in active development. 1.0 is planned for end of year. Again, open source. It's not promised. It's planned. So there's the issue where you can track this. If you liked what you see and if you want to learn more, there is some talks from Dahl, the creator. You can check them out. They're quite cool. There's a website where you can check this out. So if you liked it, try it out. It's really, I use it as my default scripting environment. It's cool for those kind of purposes. Simplest to start with, as a nice API to do all these things. So try it out, maybe get involved in the development, make it a nice competition for Node.js so things get better. Yeah, because want it or not, we will end up using these things. So yeah, thank you. It's my book, self-plug, shameless plug. Thank you. So yeah, any questions? Thank you. Yes.
One general question. Why did you move from JHipster to Node.js?
I didn't move. I'm still the co-lead of JHipster. Okay. It's just that I like to do a lot of different things. Doesn't mean I moved. So it is still on Node.js. It would be, as I said, it would be difficult to migrate. I mean, I would like to migrate JHipster to Deno, but it will be humongous. Because JHipster code base is humongous. So that would be like at least a years of effort just to migrate. So no, I have done the migration once from ES5 to ES6. It took a lot of time. So no, not anytime soon. Any other questions?
Okay. Firstly, welcome to Ukraine.
Thank you. Yeah, this was my first time. It was great. Yeah, Kyiv is a great city.
And thank you for your presentation. My question is, TypeScript is very fast in development language and environment, and now we are waiting for 3.7 version with a lot of amazing things with optional chain and so on. But does can Deno manage TypeScript versions?
Yeah. I mean, manage in the sense, you're asking if it will be compatible with those versions, right? Yeah, because it is using TypeScript. It's not like developing anything separately, right? It's just using TypeScript, right? So yeah, it's just maybe not on the same day. They may not be compatible, but in a few days, just like in every other TS node or whatever, right? Just in few days, it's going to be like compatible.
And also, can I specify specific TypeScript compiler flags, for example?
Yeah, there is a
model, so.
Yeah, there is a -c or -config where you can specify a TS config file where you can play around with these options. I mean, you cannot specify flags as it, but it's the same, right? Flags or TS config. The options are the same, so you can put it in a TS config, you can pass it around. Currently, it doesn't support all the options. Some options are not supported and it's going to give you a warning that this is not supported. That's because of the way how Deno works. For example, it doesn't support require.js, whereas TypeScript supports. So those kind of things, it's going to just ignore and say, hey, this is not supported. But everything else you can control.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, anything more? Okay, thank you guys. Thanks for coming and thanks for being brave.